Hello, my name is Etienne Gadient. I'm a part of the cloud consulting team here at CloudLogic. I am an AWS Certified Solutions Architect and a certified professional Google Cloud Data Engineer and Solutions Architect. I've been designing private and public cloud solutions for well over the last decade, while also designing enterprise architecture. Today I would like to talk to you about your AWS account, how it interacts with VPCs and regions, including some important implications that will affect how you consume AWS. Our talk is the second of several, focusing on key architectural and design decisions. Today we will focus on the AWS accounts, VPCs, and regions in about 10 minutes. As we discussed in a previous video, AWS account do's and don'ts, the AWS root account is first and foremost a billing entity. It contains all of the resources that will be consumed within AWS. It is also important to note that you can have multiple root accounts in order to be able to segregate control, separate billing, or to provide other logistic or security purposes. The AWS account is a boundary for all the IAM users and roles that will be defined to administer and support your AWS environment. And it's the ultimate root account. It can literally do anything to any resource within your environment. And while that sounds very convenient, it also can be very dangerous. So what is a VPC? A VPC is a logical segregation and isolation of resources, similar to security zones within an enterprise. Elements that live within the same VPC tend to have a high level of coupling and an ability to, and a need to communicate with each other. Unlike a VPC, which provides logical separation and isolation of resources, an availability zone is about physical separation and redundancy of resources. So availability zones ensure that I can provide highly available applications within a single region. To dive a little deeper into this, each availability zone is built as a fully independent stack of components and architecture, such that I can tolerate the loss of any component within any availability zone, and as long as my applications and workloads are deployed across multiple availability zones, I will not lose service. However, availability zones affect how things communicate with each other. I'll talk more about that in a bit. Infrastructure deployed in the same availability zone, but across different VPCs, cannot communicate unless access is explicitly allowed and enabled. Additionally, IAM users and roles can be discretely applied from the account to individual VPCs or to all VPCs. This gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility when it comes to being able to segregate VPCs into job types, for example, production versus development environments, or if I want to segregate resources and users and roles by business units to make sure that accounting can't get into finances work or that sales can't get into HR. VPCs all live within an account. So VPCs cannot naturally cross accounts or span multiple accounts. So let's take a look at what happens when you want to cross regions. A region provides geographical diversity. By locating into two or more regions, just like availability zones provided resiliency and redundancy within a data center, this now provides the ability to ensure that a major disaster in any geography can be survivable. As you can see here, all of the regions and entities in this example live within a single account. It's also important to note that VPCs cannot cross regions. Now, we just covered that. So each region will have unique VPCs. And yet, all of these different VPCs in all of these different regions can leverage common IAM user accounts and roles since they're part of a single AWS account, since they're part of a single AWS account. However, it's also important to note that not all services are available in all regions. Now, all of this flexibility can be greatly empowering, or it can be very, very complicated. So let's take a look at how communications take place within and across regions and implications to metering and billing. So let's talk about intra-region transport. If I want to have two workloads communicating within the same VPC and the same AZ, it does not incur any additional transport fees. Now, before we start to talk about pricing, it's important to note that all pricing is subject to change. CloudLogic does not control the pricing, and these are also prices that are as of the time of this writing. It's also important to note that this pricing assumes private subnets. Public subnets that leverage elastic IPs can roughly double these costs compared to North American prices. Now, traffic that crosses AZs, but within the same VPC, is metered at 1 cent a gig. Surprisingly, traffic within the same AZ but crosses VPCs is also metered at 1 cent a gig. So what happens when you want to get out of the region? When communicating across regions, the metered price can change dramatically. And it's always billed based upon the region it egresses or leaves, rather than where it goes. The current trend is that inter-region transport varies significantly by region, with US and EU inter-region transport less costly than Asia Pacific and Latin America. For example, US East to US West is about 2 cents a gig. One not natural thought would be Europe would be more expensive, and yet US East 1 to EU Central 3 in Paris is also 2 cents a gig. Now this is where things get interesting. Inter-region traffic from AP Northeast 1, which is Tokyo, is almost 4.5 times the cost of communications out of North American and North American data centers. Inter-region traffic from South America East 1 in São Paulo is 8 times of the US and EU cost at 16 cents a gig. But here's an interesting twist. Inter-region traffic is again priced based upon the outbound direction. As a result, traffic from SA East 1, São Paulo, to US East 1 may cost 8 times of US East 1, but the reverse direction only costs 2 cents. So the direction that data flows can have a dramatic impact to eliminating hidden usage surprises. As an organization thinks about its cloud architecture, regional considerations for how and where data should be stored and how and data should be moved is key to a successful cloud and scale strategy. During the last session, we covered the comparison of different account strategies for an enterprise based upon blast zones. So let's revisit this based upon the new contexts of VPCs and regions. We will look at a single account for all services, separating one account per budget or department, and separating one account per business service or workflow. In terms of billing complexity, an account is the billing entity. So with more accounts, one account per business service or department, that will naturally separate bills into those billing entities. However, in terms of cost, the single account model tends to have the lowest cost for transport fees. But with inter-availability zone fees, the difference is not as significant versus the one account per budget. And yet I can get a tremendously smaller blast zone. For more information on blast zones, be sure to review AWS account do's and don'ts in a previous video. Remember, both inter-AZ and inter-VPC transport are 1 cent a gig. One last consideration for large enterprises. Having one account per budget or one account per business service also simplifies merger and acquisition activity, given that I can logically separate resources, accounts, and billings naturally. I want to talk a little bit about CloudLogic. CloudLogic is a professional services organization, and we specialize in 4 areas with our focus today on both consulting, strategy, and cloud optimization. One offering, Cloud Consulting and Strategy, is about aligning the organization, architecture, teams, and Cloud Center of Excellence to a common vision and capabilities that are set over time. Placement is about running what-if scenarios that measure and prioritize business, technical, and financial needs to help evaluate which applications make sense and will succeed in the cloud. Migration and transformation is really about accelerating adoption of the cloud and the ability to evolve applications to cloud-native platforms. And cloud optimization is really about eliminating unnecessary costs out of your cloud deployment while also validating your configurations against industry best practices and many regulatory frameworks, such as NIST, PCI, HIPAA, and others. So let's talk about a few best practices. Regions provide excellent protection for providing diversity when coming to regional outages and major disasters. And just like regions provide that kind of diversity, availability zones provide that kind of diversity within a region. So this provides a multiple defense in depth layer to be able to ensure that access is always available and that applications are made highly available. Additionally, account diversity improves protection from end user errors and blast zones. As we talked about different strategies for accounts, having accounts be by business unit or by budget provides a much smaller blast zone where one business unit can not have an error or an issue which causes effects to other business units. We covered this in a lot more detail in AWS account do's and don'ts. Within a data center, always use multiple availability zones for high availability. Don't be lazy. This is an important defense in depth capability. Always use multiple VPCs to segregate your application classes. Having VPCs for production, test, and dev provide very strong ability to be able to segregate users and roles depending on their job function and only give access to areas where they need to be. Shape your flow of data around egress and transport. This is an important thing to remember because, as we saw, traffic flowing in one direction can be 8 times more expensive than traffic flowing in the other direction. And by the way, that's per gigabyte. So if you're sending petabytes and petabytes of information from one region to another, the direction that it flows is crucial to having an impact to your costs. A great best practice is remembering that good architecture always balances and is always pulling the tension between performance and scale, cost, and resiliency and availability. Finally, trust but verify. Whenever you look at the cloud tools that are available, they provide a tremendous amount of insights on how to save money on your bills and how to improve your situation in terms of resizing resources, eliminating unnecessary resources, and just generally eliminating waste. So always use tools to validate costs that you need to optimize. However, a great partner can get you well beyond what the tools can do. I'd like to thank you for your time today as we talked about your AWS account, VPCs, and availability zones in about 10 minutes. For more information, please contact your account manager or use the information provided above. Thank you.